The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and life. For millennia, the Jedi had studied its light, and the Sith had mastered its darkness. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives, something that answers to neither the Force nor any known power in the galaxy? What happens when raw, primal magic tears through the fabric of space itself, bringing with it a conqueror who knows only ambition and domination? The hyperspace lanes near Lothal shimmered with their usual traffic, bulk freighters hauling Imperial supplies, TIE fighter patrols maintaining order, the endless machinery of the Galactic Empire grinding forward. It was a typical evening in the Outer Rim, unremarkable and controlled. Then the sky tore open. It wasn't a ship that emerged from hyperspace. It wasn't a meteor or a rogue asteroid. The rift that split reality above Lothal's northern hemisphere crackled with energies that defied every sensor reading, every known signature in Imperial databases. Purple and green lightning arced across the upper atmosphere, and for 3 seconds, the stars themselves seemed to scream. Then, through the dimensional wound, something fell. The figure plummeted through Lothal's sky like a comet wrapped in eldritch fire, trailing sparks of magic that left afterimages burned into the retinas of everyone who witnessed it. The impact crater it created in the grasslands outside Capital City measured 30 meters across, and the shockwave shattered windows for 2 kilometers in every direction. Imperial garrison alarms shrieked to life. Stormtroopers scrambled to their posts. And in the smoking crater, something stirred. Skeletor rose from the scorched earth, his yellow skull face twisted in rage. The Havoc staff clutched in his skeletal hand still crackled with residual power, though he could feel immediately that something was wrong. The dimensional crossing had been violent. Far more violent than intended. His attempt to breach Castle Grayskull's inner sanctum had backfired catastrophically, and the resulting magical explosion had torn him from Eternia entirely. Where, he hissed, his voice a rasp of fury and confusion. He could feel his power, yes, the dark magic still coursed through his undead form, but it felt muted, as if wrapped in thick cloth. The air here was wrong. The energy that permeated this place was alien, vast, and strangely organic. It pressed against his consciousness like a living thing, curious and watchful. Skeletor's burning eyes surveyed his surroundings. Grassland stretched to the horizon, dotted with strange fauna that fled from his crater. In the distance, a city rose, primitive by Eternian standards, its architecture blocky and utilitarian. Towers reached skyward, but they lacked the mystical grandeur of Snake Mountain or the ancient beauty of the Palace of Eternia. This was a world of industry, of machines and metal. A sound reached his ears, the high-pitched whine of approaching engines. Skeletor turned, his purple hood and cloak billowing in the wind created by his own residual magic, and watched as 4 wedge-shaped craft screamed toward his position. They moved with mechanical precision, their twin solar panel wings marking them as war machines. As they approached, red energy bolts lanced from their forward weapons, stitching the ground around him with explosive impacts. The Overlord of Evil didn't flinch. With a gesture of the Havoc staff, he erected a barrier of crackling energy that absorbed the blaster fire harmlessly. The bolt splashed against his shield like water against stone, and Skeletor's lipless mouth curved into something resembling a smile. Primitive projectiles. Crude energy weapons. Whatever world this was, its defenders were about to learn the meaning of true power. "You dare attack Skeletor," he bellowed, his voice magically amplified to carry across the grasslands. "You know not what you have done. I am the Lord of Destruction. Master of the dark arts. And you are merely the first insects to be crushed beneath my heel." The TIE fighters broke formation, their pilots confused by the figure who stood unharmed in the crater. Their comm channels crackled with frantic reports back to the garrison. Target is humanoid, approximately 2 meters tall, wielding unknown energy weapon. Conventional blaster fire ineffective. Requesting additional support. Skeletor raised the Havoc staff high. Even weakened by the dimensional crossing, even struggling to channel his power through this universe's strange energy field, he was still a master of the dark arts. The staff's ram skull head glowed with gathering power, purple, green, and black energies swirling together in a vortex of destruction. The TIE pilots, sensing danger, attempted to break away. Too late. The blast that erupted from the Havoc staff was a column of pure magical energy that struck the lead TIE fighter dead center. The craft didn't simply explode, it disintegrated, torn apart at the molecular level by forces its designers had never imagined. The 3 remaining fighters scattered, but Skeletor was already channeling another spell. Bolts of dark lightning arced from his outstretched hand, forking through the air to strike 2 more fighters simultaneously. They spiraled to the ground in flames, their pilots screaming final transmissions. The 4th TIE fighter managed to retreat, its pilot's voice high with panic as he reported what he'd seen. Skeletor watched it flee with satisfaction. Good. Let them run. Let them carry word of his arrival to whoever ruled this backward world. Let them tremble. But as the adrenaline of combat faded, Skeletor's analytical mind reasserted itself. He was stranded in an unknown dimension, his power diminished, and he had no army, no fortress, no resources. Worse. He could sense something vast and dark lurking in the background of this universe's energy field, something that paid attention to his use of power. It felt almost intelligent. Almost alive. The Force, though Skeletor didn't know its name yet, had noticed him. And across the galaxy, in his meditation chamber on Imperial Center, Emperor Palpatine's yellow eyes snapped open. In the distance, Skeletor could see more craft approaching, larger ones, accompanied by ground vehicles. An army was mobilizing against him. He could fight them, certainly. But tactical genius had always been his true strength, not mere brute force. He needed information. He needed to understand this world, its power structures, its weaknesses. And then, he would conquer it. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Skeletor planted the Havoc staff in the ground and began to walk toward the city. His skeletal feet left smoking prints in the grass, and the air around him shimmered with barely contained power. Whatever this galaxy was, whatever strange energy permeated it, it would soon learn that Skeletor bowed to no one. Not to He-Man, not to the elders of Eternia, and certainly not to whoever ruled this primitive empire of machines and metal. The Imperial Garrison commander of Lothal, a stern woman named Governor Arinda Price, stood in her command center watching the holographic feeds with growing unease. The crater still smoked on her screens, and the figure walking toward Capital City moved with the casual confidence of someone who had just swatted 4 TIE fighters from the sky like insects. Her tactical officers scrambled to coordinate a response, but the confusion in their voices betrayed their uncertainty. "What are we dealing with?" Price demanded, her hands clasped behind her back in a pose that masked her concern. "Is this some kind of rebel superweapon? A rogue Jedi?" "Unknown, Governor," her intelligence officer replied, his face pale. "The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Not lightsabers, not ion weapons, not even ancient Sith artifacts. Whatever he's using, it's something else." Skeletor continued his measured approach to the city, his burning eyes taking in every detail. The architecture spoke of a civilization that prioritized function over beauty, industrial complexes, landing platforms, orderly streets designed for efficient movement of goods and people. He could see armed soldiers establishing positions along the city's perimeter, their white armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. Curious. A uniform army, well organized. Perhaps this world had more sophistication than he'd initially assumed. But what truly fascinated him was the energy. As he walked, Skeletor extended his magical senses, probing the invisible currents that flowed through this reality. The strange force he'd felt upon arrival was everywhere, in the air, in the ground, in every living thing. It was like a vast ocean compared to Eternia's more concentrated pools of mystical power. And it had 2 distinct currents, one that felt orderly, peaceful, light, and another that resonated with his own dark nature. A smile crossed his skull face. This universe had its own form of magic, it seemed. And if he could learn to tap into it, to merge it with his own sorceress abilities. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the Imperial Response Force. 20 AT-ST walkers emerged from the city, their chicken-legged forms moving in coordinated patterns as they established a perimeter. Behind them, 3 full companies of stormtroopers took position, their blaster rifles trained on the approaching figure. Heavy weapons teams set up E-web blasters at strategic points. The message was clear, come no closer. Skeletor stopped 50 meters from their lines and surveyed the arrayed force with amusement. The walkers were impressive in their way, tall enough to tower over infantry, armed with what he recognized as energy weapons of some sophistication. But they were still machines. Still vulnerable. Attention, unidentified hostile. A voice boomed through loudspeakers, amplified and authoritative. You are in violation of Imperial law. Surrender immediately and you will be detained for questioning. Resist, and you will be terminated. Skeletor threw back his head and laughed, a sound that carried across the grassland like the howl of a damned soul. Surrender. Surrender. His voice crackled with magical amplification, forcing several stormtroopers to clutch their helmets as feedback screamed through their comms. I am Skeletor. Lord of Destruction. Master of Snake Mountain. I do not surrender to anyone. Kneel before me, you pathetic worms, and perhaps I will allow some of you to serve in my new empire. Governor Price's response was immediate and professional. Open fire. The grassland erupted in a storm of blaster fire. Red bolts poured from hundreds of rifles, while the AT-STs added their heavier chin-mounted cannons to the barrage. The E-web blasters created streams of sustained fire that would have vaporized Durasteel. The entire killing field became a hellscape of energy and death. Skeletor raised the Havoc staff, and reality bent to his will. A dome of crackling purple energy materialized around him, and every blaster bolt that struck it was absorbed, redirected, or simply ceased to exist. The barrage continued for 10 seconds, 20, 30, the Imperial forces pouring enough firepower to level a building into a single target who stood unmoving at the center of the storm. Then Skeletor struck back. The Havoc staff blazed with gathered power, and bolts of dark lightning erupted outward in a devastating arc. 3 AT-STs exploded simultaneously. Their fuel cells igniting in massive fireballs that sent shrapnel scything through nearby infantry. Stormtroopers scattered, their disciplined lines breaking as they realized their weapons were useless. Another wave of Skeletor's staff sent a wall of telekinetic force rippling across the battlefield, tossing soldiers and light vehicles like toys. But this wasn't the effortless dominance Skeletor was accustomed to. He could feel the strain of channeling his power through this universe's strange energy field. Each spell required more concentration, more effort than it should. His connection to dark magic felt like trying to shout through a thick wall. The power was there, but muffled, distorted. And that vast, watching presence in the background of reality pressed harder against his consciousness with each use of magic, as if trying to understand what he was. An AT-ST pilot, braver or more foolish than the rest, charged directly at Skeletor while firing both cannons at maximum rate. The Overlord of Evil gestured almost casually, and the walker's legs twisted into impossible angles, sending the entire machine crashing onto its side. But the effort left him breathing harder than he'd like. He needed to end this quickly before his diminished power became apparent. Enough. Skeletor roared, and this time his voice carried true magical compulsion, a spell of domination that seized the minds of the nearest stormtroopers. 24 soldiers stopped firing simultaneously, their weapons dropping to their sides as Skeletor's will overwrote their own. Your weapons are useless. Your resistance is pathetic. Take me to your leader, or I will reduce this entire city to rubble. The possessed stormtroopers turned and began walking toward the city, their movements jerky and unnatural. The remaining Imperial forces held their fire, uncertain whether shooting their own comrades would break the spell or simply kill them. In the command center, Governor Price watched the disaster unfold with cold calculation. "Pull back to secondary defensive positions," she ordered. "Seal the city districts and evacuate civilians from the northern sectors." She turned to her communications officer. "And get me a direct line to Imperial Center. The Emperor needs to know about this immediately." "Governor, it will take hours for any message to reach Coruscant, and more hours for a response." "Do it anyway," Price snapped. "Whatever that thing is, it's beyond our capacity to handle. We need Inquisitors. Or Vader himself." As the Imperial forces withdrew in organized chaos, Skeletor strode through their abandoned positions, his magically dominated soldiers forming an honor guard around him. He examined the fallen walkers, the scattered weapons, the architecture of the city beyond. Everything spoke of a vast, organized empire, not unlike the Horde Empire he'd occasionally allied with on Eternia, but on a far grander scale. His analytical mind worked through the implications. If this was merely a provincial city and could marshal such forces, then the true power centers of this empire must be formidable indeed. He would need to be careful. Direct conquest was impossible without an army, without a base of power. But infiltration, manipulation, those were arts Skeletor had mastered long ago. The strange energy field pulsed again, and Skeletor felt something new, a flicker of awareness, distant but growing closer. Someone, somewhere in this galaxy, had felt his use of power. Someone immensely strong in this universe's version of dark magic was paying attention. Good, Skeletor thought. Let them come. Let the true rulers of this empire reveal themselves. He would assess their strength, learn their secrets, and then he would take everything they had built and make it his own. The possessed stormtroopers led him toward the city's administrative district, where Governor Price waited in her tower, already formulating plans. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to become Skeletor's first source of intelligence about this strange new galaxy. Through her, he would learn about the Empire, about something called the Force, and about an emperor who ruled through fear and dark power. An emperor who would soon discover he had a rival. The Grand Inquisitor stood aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer Sovereign, his gaunt face illuminated by the pulsing hologram before him. Governor Price's report had been detailed, efficient, and deeply troubling. The footage showed a being of immense dark power, not a Force user, yet clearly wielding energies that bent reality itself. The Emperor's instructions had been explicit: investigate, assess, and if necessary, eliminate. "Prepare my shuttle," the Grand Inquisitor commanded, his yellow eyes never leaving the hologram of Skeletor's arrival. "And inform the fifth brother and seventh sister they are to accompany me. This anomaly requires immediate attention." On Lothal, Skeletor had taken residence in Governor Price's command center, not by her invitation, but because he'd simply walked in and declared it his temporary seat of power. The possessed stormtroopers stood at rigid attention around the perimeter while Skeletor studied the holographic star maps with intense fascination. The scale of this galaxy was staggering. Thousands of inhabited worlds, countless civilizations, all unified under a single empire. "Explain to me again," Skeletor said, his skeletal fingers tracing the hyperspace lanes on the display, "how your emperor maintains control over such vast territories." Governor Price stood with carefully maintained composure, though her hands trembled slightly. This creature had killed dozens of her soldiers, dominated others with some kind of mind control beyond anything she'd seen, and now sat in her command chair as if he owned it. Through fear, superior military force, and the elimination of the Jedi Order. The Emperor is the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. Force user. Skeletor rolled the words around, tasting their meaning. "This energy I sense everywhere, you call it the Force. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together." Price recited the old Jedi teaching carefully. "The Emperor and his servant Lord Vader are masters of its dark side. They can choke enemies from across a room, see the future, and," she hesitated, "and sense other Force users across vast distances." Skeletor's burning eyes narrowed. So this universal energy had been catalogued, studied, weaponized. And these Force users were this empire's equivalent of sorcerers. Interesting. He had already begun to feel how the Force responded to his magical manipulations. It wasn't quite the same as Eternian dark magic, but there was compatibility. Like two different languages describing the same underlying reality. And these Jedi your Emperor destroyed, they were his rivals. They were peacekeepers, servants of the light side of the Force. The Emperor exterminated them 15 years ago when they attempted a coup. Price gestured to the holodisplay, bringing up images of lightsaber-wielding warriors. Their weapons were plasma blades powered by kyber crystals. Lord Vader himself was once a Jedi before he turned to the dark side. Skeletor absorbed this information with growing satisfaction. A galaxy-spanning empire built on the foundation of dark power, with a ruler who had systematically eliminated his mystical opposition. It was almost admirable in its ruthlessness. But it also meant this emperor would view Skeletor as a threat the moment he became aware of his existence. Which, Skeletor suspected, would be very soon. The doors to the command center hissed open, and Governor Price's face went pale. 3 figures in dark armor and robes strode in with predatory confidence. The lead figure was tall and gaunt. His gray skin stretched tight over sharp features, his eyes burning with the same yellow intensity Skeletor recognized from his own reflection. Behind him came 2 others, a hulking brute with a similarly grotesque face, and a lithe female whose Force presence radiated calculated cruelty. Governor Price, the Grand Inquisitor said, his voice soft and deadly. You may leave. This matter is now under inquisitorial jurisdiction. Skeletor remained seated, his posture deliberately casual, one leg crossed over the other as he leaned the Havoc staff against the command chair. He studied these newcomers with interest. They radiated dark energy, not as powerfully as the strange universal force, but concentrated, focused. These were trained killers who wielded this galaxy's magic. Ah, Skeletor said, his voice dripping with theatrical menace. The true powers reveal themselves at last. Tell me, what manner of servants are you? Sorcerers? Warriors? Or merely well-dressed executioners? The Grand Inquisitor's hand moved to his belt, where a cylindrical metal object hung. I am the Grand Inquisitor, servant of the Emperor and hunter of Force-sensitive threats to Imperial order. You are an anomaly, a wielder of dark power who does not appear in any Imperial records. You will surrender yourself for questioning, or you will be destroyed. Skeletor laughed, that same bone-chilling cackle that had terrorized Eternia for decades. Destroyed? By you? I have faced the power of Grayskull itself. I have battled gods and demons. I am Skeletor, Lord of Destruction, and I surrender to no one. The Grand Inquisitor's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, its red blade humming with deadly energy. The 5th brother and 7th sister activated their own weapons, the spinning double-bladed disc of the inquisitorial lightsaber design creating a distinctive whirring sound. The 3 Inquisitors spread out, forming a triangle around Skeletor's position. Your power is strong. The Grand Inquisitor acknowledged, but undisciplined. You reek of the dark side, yet you lack proper training in the Force. You are a wild beast that must be caged or killed. Skeletor rose from the command chair in one fluid motion, the Havoc staff blazing to life in his grip. The possessed stormtroopers moved to intercept the Inquisitors, but Skeletor waved them back with a gesture. No. These ones are mine. The Grand Inquisitor struck first, his lightsaber moving in a precise Form 2 thrust aimed at Skeletor's chest. The blade moved with supernatural speed, enhanced by the Force, a killing stroke that had ended countless Jedi survivors. Skeletor's Havoc staff intercepted it with a crack of energy that sent sparks cascading across the command center. The lightsaber's plasma edge should have cut through anything, but the staff's mystical reinforcement held firm. Impossible, the Grand Inquisitor hissed. Nothing resists a lightsaber blade. Your ignorance is showing, Skeletor replied, and blasted the Inquisitor backward with a pulse of telekinetic force that was distinctly not the Force. The Grand Inquisitor crashed through a bank of computer terminals, his robes smoking from the magical discharge. The fifth brother charged from the left while seventh sister attacked from the right, their double-bladed weapons spinning in coordinated assault patterns. Skeletor's response was a gesture that summoned crackling chains of dark lightning, not Force lightning, but something older, more primal. The chains wrapped around the fifth brother's massive form, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the ceiling with bone-breaking force. Seventh sister was faster, more agile. She leaped over Skeletor's lightning and came down in a spinning strike aimed at his skull. The Overlord of Evil blocked with the Havoc staff, then swept her legs with the weapon's base. As she fell, he pointed his free hand at her and spoke a word in the dark tongue of Eternian sorcery. The paralysis spell took hold, and seventh sister found herself frozen mid-fall, suspended in the air by invisible magical bonds. She could still see, still think, but her body refused to obey. Terror flickered across her face as she realized her Force abilities were useless against whatever sorcery held her. The Grand Inquisitor recovered, calling upon the full might of the dark side. He extended both hands, and Force lightning erupted from his fingertips, true Sith lightning, blue-white and devastating. It struck Skeletor's hastily erected barrier and pushed through, forcing the Overlord to one knee as he struggled to maintain his defenses. This was different from the crude blaster fire. This was refined dark power, channeled through discipline and training. Skeletor could feel how the Inquisitor wove the Force into his attack, bending it to his will through techniques refined over millennia. It was actually hurting him, the energy crackling across his skeletal form and burning through his robes. But it also taught him something crucial. As the lightning coursed over him, Skeletor felt how the Force moved in response to the Inquisitor's will. He sensed the patterns, the flows, the underlying structure. And in a moment of dark epiphany, he understood. The Force wasn't separate from magic, it was a different expression of the same fundamental power. And if these Inquisitors could channel it through their limited training, then he, with his mastery of Eternian dark arts, could do so much more. Skeletor rose to his feet, still wreathed in the Grand Inquisitor's lightning, and began to laugh. The laughter grew as he extended his own hands and felt the Force respond to his will, not with the practiced precision of Sith technique, but with the raw, chaotic power of pure sorcery merged with this universe's dark side. Purple and black energy erupted from his hands, clashing with the Inquisitor's lightning in a storm of power that shattered every window in the command center. Yes. Skeletor roared. I understand now. This Force of yours, it is mine to command. Mine to twist. Mine to make supreme. The merged lightning sorcery blast overwhelmed the Grand Inquisitor's attack and struck him full in the chest, sending him crashing through the command center's reinforced walls and tumbling into the courtyard beyond. The fifth brother, recovered but battered, grabbed the paralyzed seventh sister and ignited his lightsaber in a defensive stance. Report to Lord Vader, he growled into his comlink, his eyes never leaving Skeletor. We found something beyond our capabilities. Require immediate. Skeletor gestured, and the fifth brother's comlink exploded in his hand. Oh no, my large friend. We're not done here. I have so many questions about this Force, and you're going to answer every one of them. The Grand Inquisitor pulled himself from the rubble, his breathing labored and his pride shattered. In 15 years of hunting Jedi remnants, he had never encountered power like this. The being called Skeletor wielded the dark side, yes, but wrong, twisted through some incomprehensible lens that made it simultaneously alien and terrifyingly effective. He reached for his comlink, fingers trembling. This is the Grand Inquisitor to all Imperial frequencies. Priority Alpha. Target is confirmed dark side entity, threat level maximum. Requesting immediate. A bolt of green energy struck his hand, and the comlink disintegrated. Skeletor strode through the broken wall, the Havoc staff glowing with barely contained power. Behind him, the possessed stormtroopers maintained their rigid vigil, their eyes vacant under their helmets. The Overlord of Evil had learned much in the past few minutes, about the Force, about these Inquisitors, about the structure of this empire. But he needed more. No more calls for help, Skeletor said, his voice calm but edged with malice. You three are going to teach me everything about this Force. Its disciplines. Its limitations. Its secrets. He gestured at the still paralyzed seventh sister hovering behind him. Starting with how your Emperor trains his servants. The Grand Inquisitor ignited his lightsaber again, adopting a defensive stance. His mind raced through options. Escape was impossible, this creature had already demonstrated it could paralyze Force users. Combat had proven ineffective. Which left only negotiation. You speak of learning, the Grand Inquisitor said carefully. Yet you attack those who could teach you. The Emperor is always interested in powerful servants. Submit to his authority, and you would have access to knowledge beyond measure. Skeletor's skull face twisted into a sneer. Submit? I submit to no one. But this Emperor of yours interests me greatly. Tell me, how did he achieve his position? Through conquest. Political manipulation. Dark sorcery. The fifth brother moved slowly to the Grand Inquisitor's side, still carrying the frozen seventh sister. All three, he rumbled. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine orchestrated the Clone Wars, manipulated both sides, and when the Jedi discovered his identity as a Sith Lord, he turned their own army against them. Order 66 activated every clone trooper simultaneously. The Jedi were exterminated in hours. Brilliant, Skeletor breathed, genuine admiration in his voice. A long-term scheme executed with perfect timing. This Palpatine sounds like a worthy adversary. He tilted his head. Or perhaps, a worthy victim. The Grand Inquisitor felt a chill despite the flames still burning in the ruined command center. You cannot defeat the Emperor. His mastery of the dark side is absolute. Lord Vader alone could crush you with a thought. Could he? Skeletor mused. He began to pace, the Havoc staff tapping against the floor with each step. Tell me about this Vader. Another servant? A general? Or something more? Lord Vader is the Emperor's enforcer, the seventh sister managed to gasp. Skeletor's paralysis spell having weakened enough for speech. He was once the Jedi's chosen one. Anakin Skywalker. The Emperor corrupted him, and now he is more machine than man, sustained by the dark side itself. This was news that made Skeletor pause. A fallen hero, rebuilt and corrupted, there was poetry in that. And a potential weakness. A cyborg, then? Dependent on technology for survival? Yes, the Grand Inquisitor said, seeing an opportunity. His armor sustains his burned body. But his power in the Force is second only to the Emperor's. He has killed Jedi Masters, destroyed entire rebel cells, and enforces the Emperor's will across the galaxy. Skeletor resumed his pacing, processing this information. The power structure was becoming clear, an Emperor at the apex, ruling through dark Force mastery and political control. Vader as his primary enforcer. The Inquisitors as specialized hunters. And beneath them, a massive military apparatus backed by industrial might spanning thousands of worlds. It was a formidable empire. But every empire had weaknesses. Release us, the Grand Inquisitor said, trying a different approach. Take us to the Emperor. Present yourself as a potential ally rather than a threat. He has destroyed greater powers than yours. Perhaps, Skeletor acknowledged. But I am not from this galaxy, Inquisitor. I am not bound by your Force, your Sith traditions, your limiting philosophies. He raised the Havoc staff, and the three Inquisitors felt an immense pressure building in the air. I am something new. Something your Emperor has never encountered. And that gives me an advantage. The Grand Inquisitor made his decision. With a desperate surge of force power, he reached out telepathically across the stars, broadcasting a warning, a plea, a distress call that screamed through the dark side itself. Any Sith Lord, any dark side adept within range would feel it. Lord Vader would feel it. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Emperor himself. Unknown entity. Immense dark power. Not force-trained. Lothal. Require immediate. Skeletor's hand clenched, and the Grand Inquisitor's telepathic scream was severed as invisible magical bonds wrapped around his throat. The Inquisitor clawed at his neck, his lightsaber dropping from nerveless fingers as he struggled for air. Clever, Skeletor hissed, but futile. Though I suppose the message is already sent. He released the spell, and the Grand Inquisitor collapsed, gasping. Good. Let your Emperor know I exist. Let this Vader come. I welcome the challenge. A new voice cut through the tension, cold, emotionless, mechanical. Your welcome is premature. Everyone turned. Standing in the courtyard entrance was a figure that radiated menace like a black sun. 7 feet tall, encased in black armor that reflected no light, breathing with the mechanical rhythm of a respirator that sounded like death itself. A crimson lightsaber ignited in his gloved hand, bathing the ruined command center in blood-red light. Darth Vader had arrived. The Dark Lord of the Sith surveyed the scene with barely contained fury. 3 Inquisitors defeated, dozens of stormtroopers standing in mindless thrall, and at the center of it all, a being whose presence in the Force was simultaneously immense and utterly wrong. It was as if someone had forced dark side energy through a prism designed for an entirely different spectrum. You are the anomaly, Vader stated, his voice distorted by his mask's vocabulator. Your power is considerable. But you lack discipline. Refinement. He took a step forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You will surrender, or you will be destroyed. Skeletor's burning eyes locked with Vader's masked gaze, and for a moment, 2 dark wills clashed in silence. The Overlord of Evil felt the sheer weight of Vader's presence. This was no mere Inquisitor. This was a being who had been broken and reforged in darkness. He thrust his hand forward, and Force lightning erupted, red-tinted and angry, modified by his cybernetic nature but no less deadly. It struck Skeletor's hastily erected barrier and began eating through it, the Overlord forced backward step by step. This was it, the true test. Not against hunting dogs like the Inquisitors, but against a master. Skeletor could feel his power reserves depleting faster than expected. The dimensional crossing had taken more from him than he'd admitted. He needed to end this quickly or retreat to recover. But retreat was not in Skeletor's nature. The lightning intensified, Vader pouring more power into the attack with mechanical precision. But Skeletor wasn't trying to simply block anymore, he was learning. His mind, sharpened by centuries of magical study, dissected Vader's technique with analytical brilliance. The Dark Lord channeled the Force through his rage, his pain, his suffering. The cybernetic implants actually enhanced his connection to the dark side by making his physical agony constant and inescapable. Fascinating. Skeletor began to laugh even as the lightning scorched his robes. Yes. Show me more, Vader. Show me the depths of Sith hatred. Then he did something that shocked even the Grand Inquisitor, who was watching from his position on the floor. Skeletor stopped resisting entirely. He opened himself to Vader's lightning, let it flow into him, and began to absorb it. Not through Force technique, but through the same dark magical principles he'd used to drain power from Eternian sorcerers. The lightning coursed through his skeletal form, and rather than destroying him, it fed him. Vader immediately ceased his attack, recognizing the danger. Impossible. Nothing is impossible, Skeletor replied, his form now crackling with residual energy, when you understand that your Force and my magic are merely different dialects of the same language. He raised the Havoc Staff, now supercharged with absorbed Force energy. Allow me to demonstrate a translation. The blast that erupted from the Havoc Staff was a hybrid, force lightning woven through with Eternian dark magic, creating something neither Jedi nor Sith had ever encountered. Vader's lightsaber came up in a defensive flourish, the crimson blade catching and redirecting the energy, but the magical component bypassed his force defenses and struck his armor directly. Warning lights flared inside Vader's helmet. System malfunctions cascaded through his life support as the alien energy interfered with his cybernetics. For a terrifying moment, his respirator stuttered. The Dark Lord staggered, one hand clutching his chest panel while the other maintained his lightsaber guard. Skeletor pressed his advantage. A gesture of his hand sent a wave of pure telekinetic force, not the refined force push of a Jedi, but a brutal magical shockwave that lifted debris, furniture, and even the paralyzed Seventh Sister into the air. Vader planted his feet and used the force to anchor himself, but the strain was evident in his labored breathing. "You're strong," Skeletor acknowledged, "but your reliance on that armor is a weakness I can exploit." He began to circle, the Havoc staff leaving afterimages in the air. "Tell me, Vader, what happens when I disrupt your life support? How long can the mighty Sith Lord last without his mechanical lungs?" Vader's response was to reach out through the Force and seize one of the T-Rex outside. The entire walker, 20 tons of metal and weapons, tore free from the ground and hurtled through the command center wall directly at Skeletor. The Overlord of Evil barely had time to erect a barrier before the impact sent him crashing through 3 more walls and into the streets beyond. The Dark Lord of the Sith strode after him, his cape billowing, his breathing steady despite the damage to his systems. Behind him, the Grand Inquisitor finally rose, helping the fifth brother carry the still-weakened Seventh Sister toward safety. They had no desire to remain in the crossfire of this battle. Skeletor emerged from the rubble, his robes torn and his left shoulder dislocated. With a grunt and a flash of dark magic, he snapped the joint back into place. Throwing furniture. How crude, Vader. I expected more sophistication from Palpatine's chosen apprentice. You talk too much, Vader replied, and unleashed a barrage of force attacks in rapid succession. Chunks of permacrete tore themselves from buildings and became projectiles. Abandoned speeders crumpled into metal spheres and launched at supersonic speeds. A fuel depot 3 blocks away exploded as Vader's telekinetic grip crushed its containment fields, sending a fireball mushrooming into the sky. Skeletor deflected what he could, absorbed what he couldn't avoid, and retaliated with equal fury. Dark lightning arced from his fingertips, now tinged with the purple of his natural magic and the blue-white of absorbed force energy. Waves of necromantic cold froze moisture in the air, creating ice barriers that shattered under Vader's assault. Illusions of himself appeared and disappeared, forcing Vader to track multiple targets. But Vader was not fooled. His connection to the Force allowed him to sense which Skeletor was real, and his lightsaber carved through illusions without hesitation. The two combatants tore through Capital City's industrial district, their battle leaving a trail of devastation that had civilians fleeing in panic and stormtrooper reinforcements hesitating to engage. Your power is formidable, Vader admitted as they faced each other across a cratered street, but undisciplined. You waste energy on theatrics. On bravado. And your power, Skeletor countered, breathing hard, is a cage. You follow the teachings of dead Sith Lords, limited by their understanding. I am not bound by such restrictions. I will surpass your Emperor, Vader. I will take everything he has built and remake it in my image. For the first time, Vader laughed, a cold, mechanical sound devoid of humor. You are not the first to make such claims. The Emperor has destroyed countless would-be usurpers. You are simply another corpse waiting to happen. We shall see. Skeletor slammed the Havoc staff into the ground, and a pulse of dark magic rippled outward. The earth itself responded, cracking and heaving as the Overlord tapped into something primal, not the Force, but the ambient mystical energy that existed in any universe's fundamental structure. Tendrils of darkness erupted from the fissures, reaching for Vader like grasping hands. The Dark Lord leaped into the air, using the Force to propel himself 30 feet straight up and land on a building's ledge. But Skeletor was already in motion, levitating himself with a combination of magic and crude force technique. The two met in midair, lightsaber clashing against Havoc's staff in a shower of sparks. They fought across the rooftops of Capital City, moving at speeds that left afterimages. Vader's lightsaber technique was Form V Gem, so powerful, aggressive, overwhelming. Each strike carried the weight of his entire being, physical and force-enhanced. Skeletor's style was chaotic by comparison, mixing staff fighting techniques from Eternia with improvised force powers and magical blasts at point-blank range. But Skeletor was tiring. The dimensional crossing, the battle with the Inquisitors, and now this extended duel with Vader were draining his reserves faster than he could recover. His connection to Eternian magic was still muted by the dimensional barrier, and while he'd successfully begun tapping the Force, he lacked the lifetime of training that made Vader so devastating. Vader sensed this. "You are weakening. Your borrowed power fails you." "Perhaps," Skeletor gasped, barely blocking a strike that would have severed his staff. "But I've learned enough." With a desperate surge of will, Skeletor reached deep into the dark side of the Force, not with Sith technique, but with raw magical instinct. He found the currents of darkness that flowed through this galaxy, the fear and anger and suffering of trillions. And he pulled. The sky above Capital City darkened. Storm clouds formed with unnatural speed, swirling into a vortex directly above the combatants. Lightning, true lightning, not force power, began to strike randomly across the city. The temperature plummeted. And in that moment of elemental chaos, Skeletor channeled everything into one massive spell. Behold the power of Skeletor. A pillar of purple-black energy erupted from the Havoc staff, punching straight up through the storm clouds and into space. It wasn't a directed attack, it was a signal. A declaration. A mark burned into the very fabric of the Force itself that announced to every sensitive being in the galaxy that something new, something ancient, and something terrible had arrived. On Imperial Center, thousands of light years away, Emperor Palpatine stood in his throne room and felt the disturbance. His yellow eyes narrowed. This was not the Force as he knew it. This was something that predated the Sith, something that existed outside their teachings. Something that could threaten even him. Back on Lothal, the effort of creating that signal spell left Skeletor completely depleted. He collapsed on the rooftop, the Havoc staff clattering beside him. Vader approached slowly, lightsaber raised for the killing blow. "You fought well," Vader acknowledged. "But you are finished." Skeletor looked up at the Dark Lord and smiled, a skull's grin of defiance. "Am I?" "Look around you, Vader." The Dark Lord paused and extended his senses. All across Capital City, the dying energy of Skeletor's spell had touched people, civilians, stormtroopers, even Imperial officers. And in touching them, it had planted seeds. Seeds of ambition. Of rebellion. Of the knowledge that the Empire could be challenged. More importantly, that massive force disturbance had been felt across multiple sectors. Every force sensitive in range now knew where Vader was, what he was doing, and that he'd been pushed to his limits by an unknown entity. Rebel spies would report it. Moff Tarkin would demand explanations. And the Emperor would have questions that even Vader couldn't easily answer. "You may kill me now," Skeletor wheezed, "but the damage is done. I have announced myself to your galaxy. Your Emperor knows I exist. And even if you strike me down here, the knowledge of what I am, what I can do, will spread." Vader's blade hovered inches from Skeletor's throat. One stroke would end this threat. But the calculus had changed. Dead, Skeletor was a mystery, a martyr, and potentially a greater problem. Alive, he could be interrogated, studied, and eventually controlled. The Emperor would want him alive. "You will come with me," Vader said, deactivating his lightsaber. "The Emperor will decide your fate." Skeletor's laughter was weak but genuine. "Excellent. I was hoping for an introduction." The Executor, Darth Vader's superstar destroyer, hung in orbit above Lothal like a dagger pointed at the planet's heart. Skeletor stood in a containment field within the detention block, his Havoc staff confiscated and held in a separate chamber under heavy guard. The energy restraints hummed around him, designed to suppress Force abilities, but Skeletor's magic operated on different principles, and he'd already begun probing the field's weaknesses. Not that he intended to escape. Not yet. Admiral Piet stood outside the containment field with a datapad, documenting every detail of the prisoner. Subject displays no midichlorian count consistent with known Force-sensitive species, he reported to the hologram of Vader. Yet clearly wields dark side energies. Medical scans indicate non-human skeletal structure. Undead physiology incompatible with known biology. Recommend maximum security protocols. Maintain current restraints, Vader commanded from the bridge. The Emperor will arrive within 12 hours. No one is to approach the prisoner without my explicit authorization. Skeletor listened to this exchange with satisfaction. 12 hours. That gave him time to rest, to recover, and most importantly, to learn. Since his capture, he'd been studying the ship's systems through mystical senses, feeling the flow of power through its reactors, mapping the hierarchy of minds aboard. This executor was a marvel, a city in space, armed with enough firepower to reduce planets to slag. And it would make an excellent flagship once he claimed it. A junior officer approached Piet nervously. Admiral, the prisoner has been talking to himself. In languages our translators can't identify. Ignore it, Piet said dismissively. Lord Vader wants him isolated and silent until... I'm not talking to myself, Skeletor interrupted, his voice carrying despite the containment field. I'm communing with the dark energies of this vessel. Did you know your reactor has a microscopic containment flaw? It won't fail for another 6 months, but when it does, this entire section will be flooded with radiation. Piet's face went pale. Impossible. Our systems would have detected. Your systems detect what they're designed to detect. I sense what is. Skeletor's burning eyes fixed on the Admiral. Tell me, Piet, how many times has Lord Vader killed officers for failure? 3 times this year. 4. The Admiral's hand trembled slightly. How do you know my name? You've been unconscious since your capture. I know many things. I know you have a family on Coruscant. A wife. 2 daughters. You send them holovids every week, trying to convince yourself that serving the Empire keeps them safe. Skeletor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried perfect clarity. But you wonder, don't you? You wonder if the Emperor's promises of order are worth the atrocities you've witnessed. Silence. Piet snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Your psychological games won't work on Imperial officers. Skeletor smiled. I'm not playing games, Admiral. I'm offering you a choice. Continue serving masters who view you as disposable, or consider alternatives. Before Piet could respond, the detention block's doors hissed open. Darth Vader strode in, his presence immediately dominating the space. Leave us, he commanded, and the officers fled with barely disguised relief. The Dark Lord approached the containment field, studying his prisoner. You speak of choices, yet you currently have none. The Emperor is curious about you. That curiosity is the only reason you still live. Curious? Skeletor leaned forward, his skeletal hands clasped behind his back. About what, precisely? My origins? My power? Or perhaps, whether I represent an opportunity? You represent a threat. Nothing more. And yet you didn't kill me on Lothal. You could have. Your blade was at my throat. Skeletor tilted his head. Why the hesitation, Lord Vader? Did you fear what your Emperor would say if you destroyed something unique without his permission? Or did you sense that I might be more valuable alive? Vader's breathing was the only sound for several seconds. You understand nothing of the Emperor's plans. His vision spans decades. He has foreseen threats far greater than you and eliminated them before they could manifest. Has he foreseen me? Skeletor asked. Can his visions pierce the dimensional barriers between universes? I think not. I am a variable your Sith prophecies never accounted for, Vader. An X-factor in an equation your Emperor thought he'd solved. Arrogance. Every dark side user believes they are special. The Emperor has heard such claims from countless Force adepts, fallen Jedi, and would-be Sith. All of them are dead. Skeletor laughed, that same unhinged cackle that had echoed through Snake Mountain for decades. But none of them were me. None of them had mastered dark magic independent of your force. None of them could teach your Emperor new forms of power he never imagined. He pressed against the containment field, his face inches from the energy barrier. I felt his presence when I released that spell on Lothal. Your Emperor is intrigued, Vader. Frightened, perhaps. And that makes me far more valuable than any threat he can simply eliminate. Vader reached out with the Force, attempting to probe Skeletor's mind, to sense his true intentions, his fears, his weaknesses. But the Overlord's consciousness was a maze of dark magic and alien thought patterns. Vader could sense ambition, certainly. Hunger for power. But also genuine curiosity, strategic brilliance, and a kind of theatrical madness that made his motivations unpredictable. You believe you can manipulate the Emperor, Vader stated. You cannot. He has orchestrated the fall of republics and the corruption of chosen ones. Whatever schemes you plot, he will unravel them before you begin. Perhaps. Skeletor settled back, appearing almost relaxed despite his imprisonment. Or perhaps your Emperor and I will find common ground. We are both students of darkness, after all. Both seekers of ultimate power. The difference is that I have knowledge from an entirely different magical tradition. Imagine what your Emperor could accomplish if he learned to merge Sith teachings with Eternian sorcery. You would surrender your secrets in exchange for what? Your life. I would negotiate. As equals. Skeletor's eyes burned with intensity. I have no interest in dying in some Imperial torture chamber, Vader. But neither will I simply bow and serve. I propose an alternative, a partnership. Your Emperor gains access to magical knowledge that could make him truly unstoppable. And I gain resources, armies, and a base of power in this galaxy. The Emperor takes no partners. Only servants or corpses. Then he limits himself. The Sith rule of two, always two there are, no more, no less. A master and an apprentice. But what if there was a third? Not a Sith, but an ally from beyond your traditions? Someone who could provide power without threatening the succession? Vader's respirator hitched, the only sign that Skeletor's words had struck something. The Dark Lord turned away, his cape swirling. The Emperor will hear your proposal himself. If he finds it lacking, you will discover that there are worse fates than death. The interrogation droids can keep you conscious and screaming for weeks. I look forward to the meeting, Skeletor replied, genuine anticipation in his voice. I've always wanted to meet a being who conquered a galaxy. After Vader left, Skeletor closed his eyes and extended his mystical senses once more. He'd planted seeds during that conversation, doubt, curiosity, the hint of possibilities. Vader was the Emperor's greatest weapon, but also potentially his greatest liability. The Dark Lord's fall from grace was built on the promise of power to save loved ones, and his transformation into a machine had left him bitter, trapped. Such bitterness could be exploited. More immediately, Skeletor began the process of attuning himself to the ship's systems. The Executor ran on technology, yes, but that technology interacted with the Force in subtle ways, computers making decisions, crew members' intuitions guiding actions, the ship itself becoming almost organic in its complexity. And where there was complexity, there were gaps. Spaces where magic could seep in. By the time the Emperor arrived, Skeletor intended to have invisible threads woven throughout this vessel. Not enough to control it, but enough to cause chaos if necessary. Enough to ensure that even imprisoned, he was not helpless. In his private meditation chamber, Vader stood before a hologram of Emperor Palpatine. The Sith Lord's hooded face regarded his apprentice with those terrible yellow eyes. "Tell me of this Skeletor," Palpatine commanded, his voice soft and serpentine. "His power is considerable, Master. He wields the dark side, but through unfamiliar techniques. His knowledge appears to come from an entirely different magical tradition." "Yes," Palpatine hissed, his pleasure evident. "I felt his presence across the stars. Such delicious darkness, untainted by Jedi philosophies or Sith doctrine. Raw. Primal." The Emperor leaned forward. "What does he want?" "Power. Recognition. He speaks of partnership rather than servitude." Palpatine's laughter was like rustling paper, dry, brittle, ancient. "They all do, in the beginning. We shall see how long his pride lasts once I have plucked the secrets from his mind." The Emperor's smile was cruel. "Prepare my ship, Lord Vader. I wish to meet this Skeletor personally. It has been so long since I encountered genuine novelty." "Yes, my master." After the hologram faded, Vader remained motionless, his thoughts hidden even from himself. The prisoner's words echoed in his mind: partnership, third option, power without threatening succession. Dangerous thoughts. Treasonous thoughts. But thoughts nonetheless. In the detention block, Skeletor opened his eyes and smiled. The pieces were moving. The Emperor was intrigued. Vader was uncertain. And across this vast galaxy, the disruption he'd caused on Lothal was already spreading. Rumors of a sorcerer who fought Vader to a standstill, whispers of powers beyond the Force, fear and hope in equal measure. He had arrived as a castaway, diminished and alone. But he was Skeletor, Lord of Destruction, and he had toppled kingdoms with less. This Galactic Empire, with all its might and darkness, would learn the same lesson Eternia had learned countless times. Never underestimate the ambition of a master villain. Emperor Palpatine's personal shuttle descended into the Executor's main hangar with ceremonial precision. Rows of stormtroopers stood at attention, their white armor immaculate, their formation perfect. Officers lined the walkway in order of rank, each one terrified of drawing the Emperor's attention. Darth Vader stood at the base of the boarding ramp, his cape perfectly still despite the hangar's recycled atmosphere. The ramp extended with a hiss of hydraulics, and the Emperor emerged. His black robe seemed to absorb light, his hood casting his face in shadow except for those burning yellow eyes. He moved with deceptive frailty, leaning on a gnarled cane, but every force sensitive aboard the ship felt the immensity of his power. It was like standing near a black hole, invisible, inescapable, and utterly devastating. "My master," Vader intoned, kneeling. "Rise, Lord Vader." Palpatine's voice was a whisper that somehow carried across the entire hangar. "Where is our guest?" "Detention block AA-23, under maximum security. He has attempted no escape." "Of course not. Why would he?" The Emperor's smile was predatory. "He wants to meet me as much as I wish to meet him. Let on." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Palpatine extended his senses, feeling the dark side flows throughout the vessel. And there, like a discordant note in an otherwise familiar symphony, he sensed Skeletor's presence. Not Force presence exactly, but something adjacent. Something that touched the dark side but came from elsewhere. "Fascinating," Palpatine murmured. "His energy signature defies classification. Not Night Sister magic. Not ancient Sith sorcery. Something older." They reached the detention block, and Palpatine waved away the guards with an irritated gesture. "Leave us. All of you." The officers and stormtroopers fled gratefully. Even Vader hesitated. "You as well, my apprentice. I wish to speak with our visitor alone." "Master, he is dangerous." "I am aware." Palpatine's tone allowed no argument. Wait outside. I will call if I require assistance. Vader bowed and departed, though he remained close enough to intervene if necessary. The Emperor approached the containment field, studying the skeletal figure within. Skeletor stood with his arms crossed, his burning eyes meeting Palpatine's yellow gaze without flinching. For a long moment, neither spoke. Two masters of darkness, each assessing the other, measuring power and intent. Finally, Palpatine spoke. You are not of this galaxy. No, Skeletor confirmed. I come from a dimension you would call Eternia. A world where magic is the dominant force, not your quaint technology. Quaint. Palpatine's laugh was soft and deadly. This quaint technology has conquered thousands of worlds. My empire spans the known galaxy. And you stand imprisoned, stripped of your weapon, contained by that very technology you dismiss. I stand here because I chose to, Skeletor replied. I could have fled Vader on Lothal. Could have disappeared into your vast galaxy and built power in secret. But I am not a coward who hides in shadows. I am Skeletor, Lord of Destruction, and I do nothing in half measures. Bold words from a prisoner. I'm not a prisoner, Emperor. I'm a guest awaiting negotiations. Palpatine circled the containment field slowly, his cane tapping against the deck. You intrigue me, Skeletor. Your power is undeniable. Your knowledge clearly extensive. But you fundamentally misunderstand your position. I do not negotiate with those who threaten my empire. I either bend them to my will, or I destroy them utterly. And which would you prefer? Skeletor asked, his voice laden with theatrical menace. A broken servant who resents every command? Or an ally who brings you power beyond anything your Sith teachings ever imagined? The Emperor stopped, his eyes narrowing. Show me. Deactivate the containment field. So you can attack me? I think not. Skeletor sighed with exaggerated patience. Emperor Palpatine, ruler of the known galaxy, master of the dark side, destroyer of the Jedi Order, are you truly afraid of one unarmed sorcerer? It was a calculated insult, designed to provoke. Palpatine recognized it as such and smiled. Very well. Let us see what makes you so confident. The containment field deactivated with an electronic whine. Skeletor stretched, his joints popping, and then held out his skeletal hand palm up. Watch carefully, Emperor. What I'm about to show you is not the Force. It predates your Sith, your Jedi, even the ancient Rakata. This is magic in its purest form. Dark energy began to coalesce above Skeletor's palm, not Force lightning, but something fundamentally different. It was purple-black and seemed to fold in on itself, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. The air around it warped, and for just a moment, Palpatine could see through the energy to somewhere else, a dimension of pure darkness, older than stars. Eternian sorcery, Skeletor explained, draws upon the fundamental darkness that exists between realities. The void that predates creation. Your force is bound to this galaxy, to living things, to midichlorians. My magic transcends such limitations. Palpatine watched with undisguised hunger. Can it be taught? Can your Sith teachings be learned by one trained in different traditions? Skeletor countered. The answer in both cases is yes, with difficulty. But imagine, Emperor, imagine if we combined our knowledge. Sith technique and discipline merged with Eternian sorcery's raw power. You could transcend the limitations of the Force itself. And in exchange, you would want resources. A territory to rule within your empire. Access to your knowledge of the Force. And most importantly, autonomy. I will not kneel, Palpatine. I will not call you master. But I will be your ally, your collaborator in the pursuit of ultimate power. The Emperor's laugh echoed through the detention block, genuine amusement mixed with dark appreciation. You have audacity, Skeletor. I admire that. Most beings who stand before me grovel or scheme poorly. You at least have the courage to state your ambitions openly. I learned long ago that honesty about one's villainy is far more effective than pretending to be something you're not. Skeletor allowed the dark energy to dissipate. We are both evil, Emperor. We both seek power for its own sake. We both have crushed those who opposed us without mercy. Why pretend otherwise? Palpatine considered this, his ancient mind working through possibilities and dangers. This Skeletor was powerful, yes. Knowledgeable, certainly. But could he be controlled? The Emperor had spent decades perfecting the art of manipulation, bending Force sensitives to his will through a combination of promised power and manufactured dependency. But Skeletor was not from this galaxy. He had no family to threaten, no homeworld to hold hostage, no attachments to exploit. And his power came from a source the Emperor didn't fully understand, which meant standard Sith corruption techniques might not work. I will propose a trial, Palpatine said finally. There is a situation in the Outer Rim that requires specialized attention. A rebel cell has established itself on Geonosis, using the old droid factories to build weapons. Lord Vader is needed elsewhere. The Inquisitors have failed twice to root them out. The Emperor's smile was cruel. You will eliminate this rebel presence. Completely. Show me what your Eternian sorcery can accomplish that the Force cannot. And if I succeed, then we discuss your autonomy further. You will have proven your value. And if I refuse? Palpatine's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Then I will spend the next month extracting every secret from your mind while you scream in agony. And when I have learned all you know, I will trap your consciousness in a Sith holocron where you will exist in torment for eternity. Skeletor met that threat with his own skull's grin. I prefer the first option. Geonosis, you said. The planet with the desert and the insectoids? You've studied our galaxy. I've listened to your officers' conversations. Surprisingly informative, prisons. Skeletor extended his hand. Very well, Emperor. I accept your trial. But I will require my Havoc staff returned, and transport to Geonosis. Palpatine did not shake the offered hand. You will be accompanied by a detachment of stormtroopers and an Imperial observer. Fail, and they have orders to execute you immediately. I won't fail. I never do, for long. The Emperor turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Skeletor. You claim your magic transcends the Force. But I sense something you have not mentioned. You are weaker now than you were in your home dimension. The crossing diminished you. Skeletor's eyes flared with anger, but he didn't deny it. A temporary condition. I am adapting. Learning to channel your Force alongside my natural magic. Soon I will be at full power. And then, Emperor, then you will see what I am truly capable of. I look forward to it. Palpatine's smile was that of a spider watching a fly approach its web. Succeed on Geonosis, and we will discuss your future. Fail, and there will be no future to discuss. After the Emperor left, Vader entered. You manipulate him. I negotiate with him, Skeletor corrected. There's a difference. Your Emperor is brilliant, ruthless, and utterly without mercy. Exactly the kind of ruler I respect. He looked at Vader directly. Tell me, Lord Vader, do you truly believe he will honor any agreement we make? Or is he simply using this mission to study me before he attempts to break me? Vader's breathing was steady, mechanical. The Emperor always honors agreements, in his own fashion. Meaning he'll twist the words to suit his purpose. Expected. Skeletor retrieved his Havoc staff as it was brought to him, feeling its familiar weight, its power resonating with his own. And you, Vader? What do you think of this arrangement? I think you are either brilliantly manipulative or suicidally overconfident. Why not both? Skeletor laughed. Prepare your stormtroopers, Lord Vader. We're going to Geonosis to kill some rebels. And perhaps I'll show you a few tricks your Sith teachings never covered. The Imperial transport descended through Geonosis's rust-colored atmosphere, its hull rattling from the desert winds. Skeletor stood in the troop base surrounded by 40 stormtroopers and one very nervous Imperial intelligence officer named Captain Vin. The captain clutched his datapad like a lifeline, trying to maintain professional composure while standing next to a skeletal sorcerer from another dimension. The rebel cell is located in Manufacturing Complex 7, Captain Vin explained, his voice slightly higher than he intended. They've fortified the old separatist droid foundries with stolen Imperial equipment. Estimates put their numbers at 200 fighters, plus whatever battle droids they've managed to reactivate. Skeletor studied the holographic display with interest. The complex was massive, kilometers of underground tunnels, assembly lines, and foundries built by the Geonosians decades ago during the Clone Wars. A fortress, essentially. Designed to withstand orbital bombardment and produce millions of battle droids. And your previous attempts to retake this facility? Skeletor asked. Captain Vin's face reddened. The Inquisitors led frontal assaults. Both times, the rebels collapsed tunnel sections, trapping our forces in kill zones. We lost 300 troopers and 2 Inquisitors before withdrawing. Frontal assaults. Skeletor's tone dripped with disdain. How predictably Imperial. Tell me, Captain, has anyone considered using the Foundry's own systems against the rebels? Surely those ancient assembly lines still have power cores, automated defenses, manufacturing controls. The rebels control those systems. They've reprogrammed everything to recognize Imperial access codes and biometrics, yes. But they can't reprogram the underlying architecture. The foundry was built by Geonosians using Bactoid technology, which means it runs on separatist AI protocols. Skeletor's burning eyes gleamed. And I am very good at corrupting AI. The transport touched down 5 kilometers from the target complex. As the ramp lowered, revealing Geonosis's barren landscape, Skeletor strode out with the Havoc staff planted firmly against the red sand. The stormtroopers followed in formation, their weapons ready, their discipline evident. But Skeletor had already dismissed them as irrelevant to his plan. He closed his eyes and extended his mystical senses, feeling the currents of dark energy that permeated this dead world. Geonosis had been the site of the Clone Wars' opening battle. Millions had died here over the years, their fear and pain soaking into the very rock. The force was thick with echoes of violence. Perfect. Captain Vin, Skeletor said without opening his eyes, I need a direct data connection to any active separatist technology within 10 kilometers. Can your equipment manage that? Possibly, but why? Just do it. While the Imperial technicians set up their portable communications array, Skeletor began walking toward the complex. Not charging, not sneaking, simply walking, the Havoc staff leaving traces of dark magic in the sand. The stormtroopers exchanged uncertain glances but followed at a distance. 3 kilometers out, the first rebel scout spotted them. Blaster fire crackled from concealed positions, red bolts stitching the sand around the Imperial formation. The stormtroopers dove for cover and returned fire, their white armor stark against the red landscape. Skeletor didn't even slow down. He raised one skeletal hand. And a barrier of crackling energy materialized around him, deflecting the blaster bolts harmlessly. He continued his measured pace toward the complex entrance, ignoring the firefight erupting around him. Target the skeletal one. A rebel commander shouted over the comms. Concentrate fire. 20 rebels focused their weapons on Skeletor. The sustained barrage should have vaporized him. Instead, he walked through it like a man strolling through rain, annoyed, but fundamentally unbothered. When he was within 50 meters of their position, he stopped and gestured with the Havoc staff. The sand beneath the rebels erupted. Tendrils of solidified darkness burst from the ground, wrapping around their legs, their torsos, their throats. The rebels screamed as they were dragged underground, their blasters falling silent one by one. In 30 seconds, the entire defensive position was gone, not destroyed, but consumed by the desert itself. Captain Vin stared in horror. What did you just? Necromantic transmutation, Skeletor explained casually. I converted the silicon in the sand into semi-organic matter bound to my will. The rebels are now part of Geonosis. Forever. He continued walking. How's that data connection coming? Established. A technician called out. I've got access to the Foundry's external sensor network. Excellent. Route it to me. Skeletor placed his hand on the communication array's interface, and dark magic flowed into the machinery. The technicians jumped back as purple energy crackled across their equipment, but the systems didn't overload, they transformed. Code began rewriting itself at impossible speeds, Imperial protocols replaced by something far older and more malicious. Inside Manufacturing Complex 7, alarms began to wail. What's happening? The rebel commander, a grizzled Duros named Callus, demanded. Someone talk to me. It's the Foundry systems. His tech specialist shouted. They're being overridden, but not by Imperial codes. It's something else. Something. The assembly lines roared to life. Conveyor belts that hadn't moved in years began to turn. Massive robotic arms designed for constructing battle droids swiveled toward the rebel positions. And from the depths of the Foundry, dormant B-1 battle droids began to activate, not with their usual moronic chatter, but in eerie silence. Their optical sensors glowed purple instead of red. Open fire. Callus screamed. The rebels unleashed everything they had at the approaching droids, but there were hundreds of them, flooding from storage bays that shouldn't have had power. And worse, these droids moved differently, tactically, efficiently, with coordination that Separatist programming had never achieved. Because they weren't running Separatist programming anymore. They were running on Skeletor's will. Outside, Captain Vin watched the tactical display with growing awe and terror. The entire Foundry complex was turning against the rebels from within. How are you controlling them? Battle droids require. I'm not controlling them in the way you understand, Skeletor interrupted. I've corrupted their AI cores with a spell of dominion. They're now extensions of my consciousness, puppets dancing on strings of dark magic and perverted code. He smiled. Observe. Through the Foundry's external cameras, they watched as the rebels fell back, fighting desperately against the tide of possessed droids. Every defensive position they'd established was now worthless, the enemy knew every tunnel, every strongpoint, every escape route. Because Skeletor knew them through the Foundry's own schematics. A group of rebels attempted to evacuate through the western tunnel. Skeletor gestured, and a section of assembly line redirected its massive arms to seal the exit. Tons of metal and machinery collapsed, crushing the escape route and trapping 30 rebels inside. Surrender, Skeletor's voice boomed through every speaker in the complex. It's something else. Something. The assembly lines roared to life. Conveyor belts that hadn't moved in years began to turn. Massive robotic arms designed for constructing battle droids swiveled toward the rebel positions. And from the depths of the Foundry, dormant B-1 battle droids began to activate, not with their usual moronic chatter, but in eerie silence. Their optical sensors glowed purple instead of red. Open fire. Callus screamed. The rebels unleashed everything they had at the approaching droids, but there were hundreds of them, flooding from storage bays that shouldn't have had power. And worse, these droids moved differently, tactically, efficiently, with coordination that Separatist programming had never achieved. Because they weren't running Separatist programming anymore. They were running on Skeletor's will. Outside, Captain Vin watched the tactical display with growing awe and terror. The entire Foundry complex was turning against the rebels from within. How are you controlling them? Battle droids require. I'm not controlling them in the way you understand, Skeletor interrupted. I've corrupted their AI cores with a spell of dominion. They're now extensions of my consciousness, puppets dancing on strings of dark magic and perverted code. He smiled. Observe. Through the Foundry's external cameras, they watched as the rebels fell back, fighting desperately against the tide of possessed droids. Every defensive position they'd established was now worthless. The enemy knew every tunnel, every strongpoint, every escape route. Because Skeletor knew them through the Foundry's own schematics. A group of rebels attempted to evacuate through the western tunnel. Skeletor gestured, and a section of assembly line redirected its massive arms to seal the exit. Tons of metal and machinery collapsed, crushing the escape route and trapping 30 rebels inside. Surrender, Skeletor's voice boomed through every speaker in the complex. Amplified by magic and technology merged. You cannot fight the Foundry itself. Your fortress has become your tomb. Surrender now, and the Empire may show mercy. Commander Callus knew a hopeless situation when he saw one. His people were being systematically slaughtered by their own defenses. All units, cease fire. We surrender. The battle droids stopped advancing but kept their weapons trained on the rebels. Slowly, reluctantly, 200 resistance fighters emerged from their positions with hands raised. The stormtroopers moved in to secure them, professional and efficient. Skeletor entered the complex with Captain Vin at his side, surveying his handiwork. The Foundry floor was a scene of devastation, bodies, wrecked equipment, and hundreds of silent battle droids standing in perfect formation. All of them watching him with those purple-lit optical sensors. Impressive, a voice echoed from the shadows. Darth Vader emerged from a side entrance, his cape flowing behind him. The Emperor said you would either succeed brilliantly or die trying. I see which outcome manifested. You were here the entire time. Skeletor accused. I was, observing. The Emperor wished to see your methods firsthand. Vader gestured at the possessed droids. This technique, merging technology with dark sorcery, is not something even the ancient Sith achieved. How is it possible? Because your Sith were limited by their understanding of the Force as purely organic, Skeletor explained, running his hand along a battle droid's chassis. They saw technology as separate from the dark side. But magic recognizes no such distinction. Consciousness is consciousness, whether biological or artificial. And anything with consciousness can be dominated. Vader was silent for a moment, his breathing the only sound. The Emperor will be interested. I'm counting on it. Skeletor turned to Captain Vin. Have your troops secure the prisoners and inventory the Foundry's capabilities. I suspect Emperor Palpatine will want this facility operational again, under proper management, of course. As the Imperials worked, Vader drew closer to Skeletor, his voice lowered. You performed well. Better than expected. But understand this, the Emperor does not share power. He studies it. Masters it. And then discards those who provided it once they are no longer useful. Are you warning me, Vader? Or yourself? The Dark Lord's respirator hitched, that telltale sign of emotion behind the mask. I am stating facts. The Emperor has used me as his weapon for decades. He will attempt to do the same to you. Then perhaps, Skeletor said carefully, we should ensure we remain too valuable to discard. Both of us. Before Vader could respond, Captain Vin approached with a report. Sir, we found something in the lower levels. The rebels were building something unusual. You should see this. They descended into the Foundry's deepest levels, where the rebels had been using ancient Geonosian tunnels for a secret project. What they found made even Skeletor pause in genuine surprise. It was a weapon, but not any conventional design. The chamber contained what appeared to be a massive kyber crystal, corrupted and dark, wired into a separatist ion cannon and surrounded by rebel-modified technology. Data terminals showed schematics for something called Project Darkstar, an attempt to weaponize the dark side itself using crystals stolen from old Jedi temples. They were trying to build an artificial force weapon, Captain Vin breathed. This is heretical. This is brilliant, Skeletor corrected, his eyes alight with dark fascination. Crude, yes. Poorly executed, certainly. But the concept is sound. A weapon that channels dark side energy without requiring force-sensitive operators. He looked at Vader. I assume this will interest your Emperor as well. Immensely. Vader examined the corrupted Kyber crystal, his hand hovering near it. The Emperor has sought to weaponize the Force for years. This could be the foundation for something far greater. Or, Skeletor said slowly, it could be the foundation for something far more dangerous. To both of us. After all, if your Emperor can weaponize the dark side without needing apprentices or inquisitors, he let the implication hang. Vader understood immediately. A weapon that could channel the dark side would make Force users obsolete. Replaceable. Disposable. We destroy this, Vader decided. Completely. The Emperor will hear of its existence, but not its specifications. Agreed. Skeletor raised the Havoc staff, and dark lightning erupted from its tip, reducing the weapon and all its schematics to slag. Some knowledge is too dangerous even for emperors. The two villains stood in the smoking ruins of Project Darkstar, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were rivals, yes. Possibly future enemies. But in that moment, they were also allies against a common threat, an emperor who sought to transcend the need for either of them. The trial is complete, Vader stated. We return to the Executor. As they ascended from the depths, Skeletor allowed himself a small smile. He had passed Palpatine's test. Proven his value. Gained Vader's cautious respect. And most importantly, he demonstrated that Eternian sorcery could accomplish what the Force alone could not. The Emperor would want to learn more. Would want to exploit this new power. And in doing so, would give Skeletor exactly what he needed, access, knowledge, and the opportunity to weave himself so deeply into the Empire's infrastructure that removing him would be impossible. Snake Mountain had been his fortress on Eternia. But this galaxy could become his empire. Emperor Palpatine stood in his throne room on Imperial Center, the massive transparent steel windows behind him framing the endless cityscape of Coruscant. Before him knelt Darth Vader, his report on Geonosis complete. The Emperor's fingers steepled before his face, his yellow eyes reflecting cold calculation. So our skeletal friend has proven both capable and dangerous, Palpatine mused. He corrupted an entire droid foundry through sorcery, eliminated 200 rebels without Imperial casualties, and even had the presence of mind to destroy a potential threat to our continued relevance. The Emperor's smile was thin and cruel. He is clever, this Skeletor. More clever than I initially credited. Yes, my master. He also suggested we had common interest in preventing your total independence from Force wielders. Did he? Palpatine's laugh was soft, like rustling leaves over a grave. How presumptuous. How accurate. He rose from his throne, his black robes flowing. Bring him to me. It is time we formalized our arrangement. The audience chamber had been prepared with deliberate intimidation in mind. Red Imperial guards flanked the throne in perfect stillness. Holographic displays showed the vastness of the Empire, fleets, armies, star systems numbered in the thousands. And at the center, Emperor Palpatine sat upon his throne like a spider at the center of its web. Skeletor entered without hesitation, the Havoc staff tapping against the polished floor with each step. He did not kneel. Did not bow. Simply stopped at what he deemed an appropriate distance and met the Emperor's gaze directly. Emperor Palpatine, Skeletor said with theatrical formality. I have completed your trial. 200 rebels eliminated. The foundry secured. Your Geonosis facility is once again productive. I believe that fulfills our agreement. It does. Palpatine descended from his throne, moving with that deceptive frailty that masked immense power. You have proven your value, Skeletor. Your sorcery is indeed something beyond traditional force applications. The question now becomes, what to do with you? We discussed partnership. Autonomy in exchange for shared knowledge. Yes, we discussed many things. But I have had time to consider the implications. Palpatine circled Skeletor slowly, his cane tapping a rhythm against the floor. You are powerful, yes. Knowledgeable, certainly. But you are also unpredictable. Uncontrollable. You follow no Sith traditions, respect no hierarchies, and openly admit your ambition to conquer. I respect strength, Skeletor countered. You have built something magnificent, Emperor. A galaxy unified under singular vision. That is worthy of respect. Flattery. How unlike you. Palpatine stopped before the skeletal sorcerer. But respect is not loyalty. Respect does not prevent betrayal. You would overthrow me the moment you believed yourself capable, just as you have attempted to overthrow whoever rules your Eternia. He-Man, Skeletor said quietly. And yes, I would destroy him and claim Castle Grayskull's power. Just as I suspect your apprentice dreams of destroying you to claim your throne. He glanced toward where Vader stood in the shadows. The Sith way, is it not? The apprentice always seeks to surpass the master. Palpatine's smile widened. Indeed. Which is why I propose something different. Not apprentice. Not ally. But, asset. Explain. The Emperor gestured, and a holographic star map materialized between them. It showed a region of the outer rim highlighted in red, a cluster of systems far from the core worlds. The Mortis Sector. 20 systems, sparsely populated, rich in resources but politically troublesome. The local governments resist imperial integration. Rebel sympathizers hide in the asteroid fields. My governors report constant unrest. Skeletor studied the map with interest. You're offering me a territory? I am offering you a testing ground. Palpatine's eyes gleamed. You will become my Moff of the Mortis Sector. You will have full authority to govern as you see fit, with one condition. You will pacify these systems completely within one standard year. Use your sorcery, your tactical genius, whatever methods you deem necessary. If you succeed, the territory remains yours. If you fail, you destroy me. Understood. Skeletor's skeletal fingers drummed against the Havoc staff. And what resources do I receive? Stormtroopers? Star Destroyers? Or am I expected to conquer 20 systems with harsh language? You will have 3 Imperial Star Destroyers, 12,000 Stormtroopers, orbital support, and access to Imperial intelligence networks. Additionally, Palpatine gestured again, and the hologram shifted to show an ancient structure, this. Skeletor's eyes widened. The structure was a fortress, massive, dark, and built in architectural styles that predated the Republic. What is that? The Citadel of Kressh. An ancient Sith stronghold on the planet Mortis Prime. Abandoned for centuries, but the dark side is strong there. Its libraries contain knowledge even I have not fully catalogued. Consider it your seat of power, your Snake Mountain, I believe you called it. It was perfect. Too perfect. Skeletor's analytical mind immediately identified the trap, a territory far from Coruscant where his activities could be monitored and contained. A fortress that likely had Imperial surveillance built into every stone. A position that gave him power but kept him isolated from the Empire's true centers of influence. But it was also an opportunity. Resources. Authority. A base to build from. And most importantly, Sith knowledge. Ancient techniques that might help him fully merge Eternian sorcery with the Force. I accept, Skeletor said. On one condition of my own. Palpatine's expression didn't change, but the temperature dropped. You are hardly in a position to make demands. Nevertheless, I require unrestricted access to any Sith holocrons or magical artifacts in your possession. I will study them, learn from them, and in exchange, I will teach you what I know of Eternian dark magic. Skeletor leaned forward. We both gain knowledge, Emperor. Is that not worth a small concession? For a long moment, Palpatine was silent. Then he laughed, genuine amusement mixed with dark appreciation. You truly have no fear, do you? Very well. You may access certain holocrons under supervision. But be warned, Skeletor, Sith knowledge has driven lesser beings to madness. The dark side consumes those who approach it carelessly. I have stared into the void between dimensions, Emperor. I have channeled powers that would shatter your Jedi's minds. I will not be so easily consumed. We shall see. Palpatine returned to his throne. You leave for the Mortis Sector in 3 days. Lord Vader will accompany you to ensure your smooth transition to power. Consider him both escort and evaluator. Skeletor turned to regard the Dark Lord, who stepped forward from the shadows. How delightful. A road trip with the Emperor's attack dog. Vader's respirator intensified. Mock me again, and I will demonstrate why the Emperor values my service. Gentlemen, Palpatine interrupted, his voice carrying command. You will work together. You will be civil. And you will both remember that I am watching. His smile was cold. Disappoint me, and you will discover that death is merely the beginning of punishment in my empire. The audience was clearly over. Skeletor bowed, ironically, theatrically, and turned to leave. Vader followed a few paces behind, his cape billowing. As they walked through the Imperial Palace's corridors, Skeletor spoke without turning. He plans to betray me eventually, you know. Once he's learned what he wants from my sorcery, I become expendable. Obviously. And you? Do you plan to kill me on Palpatine's eventual order? Vader's breathing was steady. That depends. On what? On whether you prove more valuable alive than dead. The Dark Lord moved alongside Skeletor, his masked face unreadable. The Emperor has ruled for decades through careful manipulation and overwhelming power. But he is also cautious. Paranoid. He eliminates threats before they fully manifest. Which I am. Which you could be. Vader stopped, forcing Skeletor to halt as well. But you are also a variable he cannot fully control or predict. That makes you either a fatal liability or a useful chaos agent. Skeletor's skull face twisted into a grin. And which do you prefer, Lord Vader? I prefer options. Vader's voice lowered to barely above a whisper. The Emperor has owned me for 20 years. He rebuilt me. Gave me purpose. But he also bound me to his will with chains I cannot break. You have no such chains, Skeletor. You come from outside his web of control. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I am suggesting nothing. I am stating facts. Vader resumed walking. Make of those facts what you will. Skeletor fell into step beside him, his mind racing. Vader wasn't quite offering alliance, not yet. But he was acknowledging the possibility. The cracks in Palpatine's empire were deeper than they appeared, and the Emperor's most powerful servant was not as loyal as he pretended. Useful information indeed. 3 days later, Skeletor stood on the bridge of the Star Destroyer Desolation, watching hyperspace flow past the viewports. His personal flagship, granted by the Emperor. 3,000 crew members who now answered to him. And somewhere below, in the bowels of the ship, a sealed chamber containing 3 Sith holocrons Palpatine had, graciously, allowed him to study. Captain Thrawn, no relation to the famous Grand Admiral, approached with a datapad. Moff Skeletor, we will arrive in the Mortis Sector within the hour. Intelligence reports suggest the local governments are preparing for armed resistance. Good, Skeletor said, his burning eyes fixed on the hypnotic swirl of hyperspace. I was hoping for a challenge. It's been too long since I've had the opportunity to properly conquer something. Behind him, standing in the observation deck shadows, Vader watched silently. The Dark Lord had said little during the journey, content to observe and assess. But Skeletor could feel his presence, watchful, calculating, waiting to see what this sorcerer from another dimension would do with real power. The answer would come soon enough. Skeletor had spent his entire existence seeking ultimate power, only to be thwarted by He-Man and the sorceress time and again. But here, in this galaxy, there was no He-Man. No power of Grayskull to oppose him. Only the Emperor's distant scrutiny and 20 systems ripe for domination. The desolation dropped from hyperspace, and Mortis Prime filled the viewport, a dark world shrouded in storm clouds, its surface dotted with ancient ruins and resistant cities. On the surface, the Citadel of Kressh waited, its dark spires reaching toward the violent sky. Skeletor smiled, his skeletal features sharp in the starlight. Let's begin. The Citadel of Kressh rose from Mortis Prime's barren surface like a monument to ancient cruelty. Its black stone walls had weathered millennia of storms, its spires carved with Sith runes that still pulsed with faint red light. As Skeletor's shuttle descended toward the fortress's landing platform, he felt the dark side resonating through the structure, centuries of accumulated malice, suffering, and power soaked into every stone. Magnificent, Skeletor breathed as he disembarked, the Havoc staff glowing in response to the ambient dark energy. This will do nicely. The fortress interior was a labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and forgotten libraries. Dust covered everything, but the architecture remained intact, testimony to Sith engineering and dark side preservation. Skeletor walked through halls lined with statues of long-dead Sith lords, their stone faces frozen in expressions of eternal rage. In the central chamber, where ancient Dark Lords had once held court, Skeletor planted the Havoc staff and released a pulse of magical energy. Purple light rippled outward, awakening dormant systems, igniting braziers that hadn't burned in centuries, and claiming the Citadel as his own. The fortress responded, its ancient defenses recognizing a new master of darkness. This structure was built by Darth Kressh during the Great Hyperspace War, Vader's voice echoed as he entered the chamber. Thousands died in its construction. Their suffering empowers its walls still. I can feel them, Skeletor replied, his eyes closed as he sensed the echoes of ancient torment. Their pain, their fear, their hatred. This place is a nexus of dark power. He opened his eyes and fixed Vader with an intense stare. Your Emperor gave me this fortress thinking it would corrupt me, didn't he? That the dark side concentrated here would drive me mad or make me dependent on its power? Possibly. He underestimates me. I am not some untrained force sensitive who will be overwhelmed by ambient darkness. I am Skeletor. I have built my entire existence on channeling such power. He gestured at the chamber. This fortress will not consume me. I will consume it. Drain every ounce of dark energy and add it to my own. Over the following weeks, Skeletor transformed the Citadel of Kressh into a seat of power that rivaled anything on Eternia. Using a combination of Eternian sorcery and captured Imperial technology, he restored the fortress's ancient systems and added new capabilities. Battle droids, thousands of them, all corrupted by his domination magic, patrolled the corridors. Automated defenses merged Sith alchemy with modern weapons technology. And in the deepest vaults, Skeletor studied the Sith holocrons Palpatine had provided. The first holocron contained the teachings of Darth Bane, creator of the Rule of Two. Skeletor absorbed the knowledge hungrily, how the Sith had nearly destroyed themselves through infighting, how Bane had consolidated their power by limiting their numbers, how discipline and patience could achieve what raw power alone could not. Interesting, Skeletor mused as the holocron's guardian, a spectral image of Bane himself, lectured on Sith philosophy. Your Rule of Two ensures strength through competition, but also creates a bottleneck. Only two Sith can exist, meaning knowledge must be passed down sequentially rather than exponentially. He dismissed the holocron with a wave. Inefficient. But the underlying principle is sound. But governance demanded attention as well. The Mortis Sector's 20 systems were in varying states of rebellion, and Skeletor's approach was methodical and brutal. He began with the weakest system, Mortis 3, a mining colony whose government had refused imperial taxation. The desolation arrived in orbit, and Skeletor broadcast a single message planet-wide: "I am Moff Skeletor, your new governor. You have 1 hour to surrender your leadership and submit to imperial authority. Refuse, and I will demonstrate why resistance is futile." The colonial government, emboldened by distance from the Empire's core and rumors that their new Moff was some kind of experimental imperial project, refused. Skeletor's response was immediate and terrifying. He didn't bombard the planet. Didn't send stormtroopers. Instead, he extended his consciousness through the dark side, enhanced by the Citadel's power and his own sorcery, and seized control of every automated system on the planet simultaneously. Mining equipment turned against operators. Atmospheric processors began venting oxygen into space. Power grids overloaded, plunging cities into darkness. Communication networks broadcast his skeletal face on every screen, his laughter echoing from every speaker. "This is what happens when you defy me." Skeletor's voice boomed across the dying world. "Your machines serve me now. Your technology bends to my will. Surrender, or your planet becomes a tomb of your own construction." It took 6 hours for the colonial government to capitulate completely. Not a single shot had been fired. Not one stormtrooper had set foot on the surface. And every other system in the sector received the message instantly: their new Moff could kill them without even leaving orbit. Vader observed these conquests from the Desolation's bridge with silent approval. Skeletor's methods were efficient, ruthless, and exactly the kind of innovation the Empire needed. He reported as much to Palpatine, though he left out certain details, like how Skeletor was beginning to teach him the fundamentals of merging technology with dark side power. By the 3rd month, 12 systems had submitted to Skeletor's authority. The remaining 8 were more problematic: entrenched resistance movements, rebel cells with off-world support, and one system whose population was almost entirely Force-sensitive mystics who called themselves the Disciples of Twilight. That last system interested Skeletor greatly. He arrived at Mortis 7 alone, leaving his fleet in orbit and descending to the planet's surface in a single shuttle. The disciples met him at their temple, a structure of white stone that seemed to glow with light side energy. Their leader, an elderly human woman named Seer Valen, stood at the temple's entrance with 50 of her followers. "We know what you are," Valen said, her voice carrying surprising strength. "A creature of darkness from beyond our galaxy. The Force showed us your coming in visions. Did it show you this?" Skeletor raised the Havoc staff, and the sky above the temple darkened. Storm clouds gathered with unnatural speed, crackling with purple lightning. "I am beyond your visions, Seer. I am beyond your understanding of the Force itself. Perhaps. But we will not submit to darkness. We have maintained balance in this system for generations. The Empire's tyranny ends here." Skeletor studied the assembled Force users. They were powerful. Collectively, their light side presence was impressive. Individually, none matched an Inquisitor's strength, but united they might actually pose a threat. He could destroy them, certainly. Corrupt them, possibly. But there was a third option. "Tell me, Seer Valen," Skeletor said, lowering the Havoc staff slightly. "What if I offered you a compromise? Your disciples of Twilight speak of balance, light and dark in harmony. I respect that philosophy. You speak lies. You are pure darkness. Am I? Or am I simply honest about my nature while your Jedi pretended their light was absolute?" Skeletor gestured at the temple. "I have studied your history through Imperial records. The Jedi Order fell because they were rigid, dogmatic, unable to accept the necessity of darkness. You disciples claim to understand balance. Prove it. What do you propose?" "Autonomy. Your system maintains its government, its practices, its balance. In exchange, you provide the Empire, through me, with knowledge. Force techniques. Meditation practices. Anything that might bridge the gap between light and dark. Skeletor's tone became earnest, almost conspiratorial. The Emperor seeks to control the Force through darkness alone. But what if we could demonstrate that true power comes from balance? Would that not be a worthy goal? Vader's voice crackled through Skeletor's comlink. What are you doing? The Emperor ordered pacification, not negotiation. I am pacifying them, Skeletor replied without breaking eye contact with Valen. Through means more subtle than obliteration. He muted the comlink and continued addressing the seer. You cannot defeat me militarily. But you can become valuable enough that I choose to preserve you. Help me understand the light side as I understand darkness. And together we might achieve something the Jedi never could. Seer Valen was silent for a long moment, her aged face contemplative. You offer partnership with a demon. I offer mutual benefit with a pragmatist. Skeletor smiled his skull's grin. Besides, would you rather deal with me or the next moth the Emperor sends? I can promise the next one will not be interested in philosophical discussions. The seer consulted silently with her followers through the Force. Finally, she nodded. Very well. We accept your terms. But know this, Skeletor, if you betray us, the Force itself will ensure your destruction. I wouldn't have it any other way. News of the accord spread quickly through Imperial channels. Some viewed it as weakness, a moth negotiating with Force users rather than crushing them. Others saw strategic brilliance, pacifying a troublesome system without bloodshed while gaining access to Force knowledge outside standard Imperial doctrine. Emperor Palpatine's response was measured. Interesting approach, he communicated through hologram. But I warned you about the light side's corrupting influence. Be careful it does not soften your resolve. I assure you, Emperor, my resolve remains adamantine. I seek knowledge, not redemption. By month 6, all 20 systems had submitted to Skeletor's authority. Some through force, some through negotiation, all through displays of power that left no doubt about their governor's capabilities. The Mortis Sector had been transformed from a rebellious backwater into a functioning, if unconventional, part of the Empire. More importantly, Skeletor had begun to synthesize everything he'd learned. Sith teachings from the holocrons. Light side techniques from the disciples. His own Eternian sorcery. And the raw power of the dark side concentrated in the Citadel of Kressh. The result was something entirely new, a magical tradition that transcended Jedi, Sith, and even his original powers. In the Citadel's throne room, which Skeletor had fashioned to resemble Snake Mountain's dark majesty, he stood before a massive holographic display of the galaxy. 20 systems highlighted in purple, marking his territory. But beyond them, thousands more systems waited. An entire galaxy to potentially conquer. Vader entered the chamber, his cape settling as he stopped beside Skeletor. The Emperor is pleased with your progress. He has extended your governorship indefinitely. How generous. He also wants to know when you will fulfill your promise to teach him your sorcery. Skeletor turned from the display, his burning eyes meeting Vader's masked gaze. Tell your Emperor I will teach him, when he proves himself worthy. The secrets of Eternian magic are not given freely to those who would use them as mere tools. He will not accept such conditions. Then we are at an impasse. Skeletor moved to his throne, a massive seat carved from black stone and adorned with purple crystals. I have given Palpatine what he wanted, a pacified sector, proof of my value, demonstrations of power he's never witnessed. But I will not become his slave, Vader. I will not hand over knowledge that would make me obsolete. Then what do you want? What I have always wanted. Ultimate power. But I'm beginning to realize that in this galaxy, ultimate power cannot be taken by force alone. Your Emperor has shown me that. It must be built, carefully and patiently, until you become so integral to the system that removing you would collapse everything. Skeletor leaned back in his throne, the Havoc staff resting across his lap. I am no longer the Lord of Snake Mountain, forever assaulting Castle Grayskull in futile attempts to seize power. Here, I am Moff of 20 systems. Master of ancient Sith knowledge. Student of Force disciplines from both light and dark. I am becoming something neither Jedi nor Sith, neither hero nor villain in your galaxy's simplistic terms. What are you becoming? I am becoming inevitable. Skeletor's laugh echoed through the chamber, that same bone-chilling cackle, but now carrying the weight of genuine power rather than theatrical villainy. The Emperor thinks he's using me. Vader, you think you might manipulate me. But I am Skeletor, and I have learned the most important lesson this galaxy offers. True conquest isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about making them need you. Vader stood silent, his respirator the only sound. Finally, he spoke. The Emperor was right to be curious about you. And right to fear you. Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. As Vader departed, Skeletor returned his attention to the galactic display. Somewhere out there, on Imperial Center, Palpatine sat on his throne plotting his own schemes. Somewhere in the galaxy, Luke Skywalker was beginning his journey toward heroism. And somewhere in the Outer Rim, rebel cells were growing stronger. But here, in the Mortis Sector, Skeletor had carved out a domain of his own. Not through luck or accident, but through power, cunning, and the willingness to adapt. He had invaded the Star Wars galaxy as an exile and transformed himself into a power broker. The war between Empire and Rebellion would come. Palpatine's ultimate plans would unfold. Vader's redemption or damnation awaited. But through it all, Skeletor would endure, playing both sides, accumulating knowledge, and slowly, inexorably, expanding his influence. He had not conquered the galaxy. Not yet. But he had established himself as a permanent fixture in its power structure. And that, for now, was enough. The Lord of Destruction had found his new kingdom. And he would defend it, expand it, and ultimately use it to achieve what he never could on Eternia, recognition as the supreme master of dark power. By the power of Grayskull and the darkness of the Force, Skeletor whispered to the empty throne room, I have become eternal. The invasion of Skeletor into the Star Wars galaxy had reshaped both the sorcerer and the universe he'd crashed into. What began as a dimensional accident became a calculated rise to power that neither Jedi nor Sith could have predicted. In merging Eternian dark magic with the Force, Skeletor had created something unprecedented, a hybrid discipline that transcended both traditions. The Mortis Sector stood as testament to his genius, 20 systems unified not through simple brutality, but through strategic demonstration of overwhelming power tempered by pragmatic negotiation. The Citadel of Kressh, once an abandoned monument to ancient Sith cruelty, now served as the seat of a new kind of Dark Lord, one who studied both light and dark, who commanded technology through sorcery, and who viewed the galaxy's conflicts as opportunities rather than obstacles. Emperor Palpatine had gained a valuable asset but created a potential rival. Darth Vader had found something he'd thought impossible, an alternative to endless servitude. And the galaxy itself had been introduced to powers that existed outside the binary of Jedi and Sith, light and dark. Skeletor's laughter still echoed through the Citadel's halls, no longer the frustrated rage of a villain constantly defeated, but the satisfied amusement of a mastermind whose plans were finally bearing fruit. He had learned patience from observing Palpatine. Strategy from studying Vader. Balance from the disciples of Twilight. And he had woven all of it together with his own indomitable will. The future remained uncertain. Would he eventually clash with the Emperor in a battle that would shake the galaxy? Would he form an alliance with Vader to overthrow Palpatine? Or would he simply continue expanding his domain until he became indispensable to the Empire's function? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, the galaxy far, far away would never be the same. Skeletor had invaded not with armies or fleets, but with something far more dangerous, the absolute certainty that he deserved to rule, and the cunning to make that dream a reality. The Lord of Destruction had found his destiny among the stars. And the Force itself trembled at what that might mean.